Well, hello, Amy Bobchek.
Hello, Shanti Gold.
How are
Look
you?
at that smile. I'm so happy to see you.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. And I apologize because I believe I'm about to embarrass you in ways that you would prefer I didn't, but I'm going to. And then we'll see what happens from there. But Amy is curious, wicked smart, creative, no BS in really refreshing ways, sharp wit with a strange blind spot for dad jokes. And all of this combines into, from my perspective, and I know other people's perspective, a very powerful presence that really draws people toward her. She's got this gravitational pull that I've always really admired. So we met each other professionally in the media industry, and I really only have a handful of people in my professional trajectory that I look back and say, wow, there's someone that really was at the top of my list of people that I wanted to understand and learn from and emulate as much as possible in my own way. Always encouraging. And then from there, we were able to become friends. And that is another highlight, including an epic session in Long Beach Island with a group of friends where I brought my guitar, and Amy's a fabulous musician and has an amazing voice. And we spent a long time, probably longer than our friends might have liked, with me strumming and Amy singing. It's one of the highlights that I look back on in my life. So I'm going to continue just for a second. This podcast is about underrepresented people gathering and sharing stories about the extra layers we navigate as we find our way into the already complicated career landscape. And it's also for the allies who want to sit with us and hold hands and learn. And I couldn't be happier to have you here as our first ally guest, and particularly apt because you directly inspired this podcast, which we'll talk about more. So that's my very long but heartfelt introduction. So glad to have you here.
Oh, gosh, that's all so nice. Thank you so much. It's funny. Sometimes I forget that we worked together and it's just the incidental way we happened to meet. You're one of those people that I feel like I knew my whole life. And it's just been such a gift to get to know you and to walk alongside you through this magical journey that you're on and this epic discovery you're making and niching into the work that you're meant to do. So I just couldn't be more honored to be watching all that unfold and consider myself in your circle as it's all happening.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Let's start with your professional journey and anything that you'd like to share.
Well, as you know, I spent 25 plus years in the advertising industry. One of the things that attracted me to you was advertising, and advertising sales in particular is like the Ellis Island of professions. Bring us your poor huddled. If you have failed out of everything else, media sales will take a chance on you. There's a radio station, there's a TV station, there's a cable company, there's a newspaper that'll give you a shot. And that's where people really can discover potential that maybe they were unable to discover in other pursuits. So it's unusual to find someone that has the intellect and education and background and worldliness that you do. And there's also this incredible humility about you because most of us are also, like me, a youngest child. There's no bad attention. I'm here in a room of media professionals, salespeople in particular, that are just trying to figure out like who's got the loudest voice in the room, who's the smartest person in the room. And usually it's you, but you weren't the one kind of raising your hand saying, hey, I'm over here being, brilliant while you're all sitting there patting yourselves on the head. So anywho, you stood out in a sea of folks to me.
Thank you.
Of course. And after that long career in advertising sales, I found myself at a crossroads and decided to make a change that was risky for me, but was all about discovering what my real potential was. Because working in large companies, I felt like people were telling me, and I broke out of the matrix a little bit. And I was like, I don't even know what I can do. And the words in my head, Shanti, were, I will never know if I can fly unless I go do something else. Mm-hmm. So the something else that I did was I went and worked for this teeny tiny little startup, pre-Series A, no money, people's uncles and friends funding it. And it was just such an amazing experience. And I learned so much. And it did open up some space for me to see myself in new ways, and things that I didn't think I could do, I was doing. I spent some time there, a couple of years. And what I've settled into in the last few years is this great work in workplace culture and compliance training. So I'm working for a company now that helps corporations really build the types of cultures internally that they want, respectful, diverse, inclusive kinds of workplaces. So it's been a really cool journey. It doesn't probably make sense on a resume, but there's a thread through all of it. I'm not sure I can name it, but it's worked for me.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me because of your curiosity and your insatiable desire to learn constantly and grow. So, and then personally, something people may not know about you or something you want to share.
I can't imagine there's a thing people don't know about me. I'm such a live out loud person. My curiosity has led me to get really deeply entrenched in cultural things. You mentioned I'm a musician. I have been my whole life, discovered my inner rock star in my 40s, and I've been playing with a rock band for 15 years or so. And it's so fun, and starting to spend time with other musicians in our community here. I'm on the board of our visitors bureau. So doing things to try to promote tourism in the place that I live by highlighting our musical community, and also the collection of public art that we have grown here in this little historic town in Virginia where I live. And I run public art tours occasionally for people. So just, I guess maybe those are things that people might not know about me. Probably they do. They do now.
Now they do. I'm so glad that I can be a part of people knowing that. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And your pronouns that you use?
I use she, her pronouns.
Yes.
I am a cisgender white woman, increasingly identifying as a older worker. I'm discovering in the workforce, heading toward the maybe sunset of my career in the next few years or so, starting to notice my experiences as a 56-year-old woman, how different they are from when I was a 30-something-year-old woman in the peak of my ambition and career. It's been really interesting.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to that crazy, wonderful world we came from and the energy of that, and probably the energy of where you're at now being different and a transition, right?
For sure. The workforce is different.
Yeah.
The people that are entering the workforce are changing it. They are putting their foot down about what they're willing to put up with.
Yeah.
They're on the lookout for toxic leadership, and they're pushing back against workaholism and all of the things that I'll speak for myself, I and others like me, embraced for the sake of success. They're not having it. So it's great. I go on PTO and nobody's looking for me. Yeah, there's a real transformation taking place, and I'm experiencing it as a worker. And again, in the work that we do, working with so many other workplaces, I'm getting a lot of data about what's changing out there. It's very different than what we were feeling in a Fortune 50 company at the kind of peak of intensity.
Yeah. And if I may, I'm just going to add ally to your adjectives.
Thanks. That's such a weird word I don't know. We could talk about this.
Let's talk about it.
I would like to know what you mean when you say ally.
It's a great question. I feel like it's someone who shows up with curiosity in the spirit of wanting to learn and support. And what I'm learning, even in just speaking to people for the podcast, I think it goes beyond just, hey, I'm here for you, but also proactively taking some action. And that could be as simple. This came up in another podcast interview. This was with a transgender colleague, friend. She said, if I post something on LinkedIn as an ally, it's one thing to like the post and it's another thing to reshare the post. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I'm starting to learn is there's a certain amount of proactivity that goes along with it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say about being an ally? I am inspired by my mother, who was a very outspoken voice for the underdog. My mom was a fierce protector of people that may not be able to speak for themselves. There's this great story. I actually told this at her funeral earlier this year. She and my dad were snowbirds, and they spent the winters in Arizona, and they were in the airport waiting to come home back to Virginia. And my mother struck up a conversation with an elderly gentleman, and they were having a lovely time chatting. And at some point, this man made a homophobic comment, probably assuming he was in a safe space with a woman in her 80s that probably felt the same way he did about gay people. And my mom's claws came out, and she gave him a point the finger lecture. Don't you dare make assumptions that I would share such an opinion with you. what a hideous thing to say. I'm like, she let him have it. The second she got off the airplane and I picked her up, she's like, you will not believe what just happened a few hours ago. And that was my mom. She was so quick to jump in. And what I'm learning in my work is that the actions of a bystander matter so much. The most likely position we play in seeing things happen in the world that shouldn't be happening, we're much more likely to be watching it than being a victim of something or a perpetrator of something. So you have to be willing to step in and know how to do it. And I was so lucky to have her as that example, but I didn't really think of myself as being an ally or her as being an ally at the time. So that's why I'm just wondering, like, there's an advocacy kind of role to be played, but I'm not an expert on your life or anybody else's life. All I know is if I saw somebody saying something that was insulting to you, I'd probably punch him in the neck. Like, so that's my allyship. That's what I got for you.
Aligns completely with everything I know about you. What a wonderful legacy with your mom.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit of what I was alluding to, and I'm coming to think about allyship. You got to jump into the ring a bit, right? And that doesn't mean that you necessarily understand everything that's going on in the ring, but you just know that you're needed in the ring and you follow that instinct.
Yes, that's such a good way to put it. And it's absolved me of the need to know everything, which has been a bit of a value in my life. Like,
me too.
Yeah. When you give yourself the permission to detach from the things that you know, it opens up the space to learn. So it's nice to know that I don't have to know to be valuable and to be supportive and encouraging, not only for people like you who I love and would do it for anyway, but for a whole bunch of people I've never met. That is valuable and matters and isn't like an intrusion or some kind of presumptuous, who do you think you are, lady? You know anything about my life, which I don't, but I just want everybody to have a good one.
It's amazing. Love you. Love you.
Well,
so I'm going to intro this story because it so directly ties to the reason that we're sitting here for this podcast specifically. And I reference this in the trailer and in the first episode because it really is an anchor and in the fiber of what we're doing. So I had been out in my professional career for roughly 20 years with people who knew me well, people in my inner circle or maybe just outside of my inner circle. However, I was not sharing that part of myself with the larger network that I built over many years until I identified my niche, the people that I most wanted to serve as a professional executive coach. I knew that it was LGBTQ plus and underrepresented people and helping them navigate their careers by being fully themselves. And I announced that in a post on LinkedIn. And in that post, along with telling people about this niche that I was so excited about, I told what I call 2 career coming out stories. And for me, that was a big moment because that was the coming out part, the part where it went from my closer circle to the much, much broader circle that I'd built in my professional network. So I shared those stories and you sent me a text, and I hope you don't mind me quoting, quote, "Unless people like you are willing to share what it's like to walk in this world that loves it, some cisgender hetero white people, we just don't get it." And I was like, wow, man, Amy's supportive, open, curious, smart, and she had no idea. And she wants to know more about this. And that kind of sat with me, but it never occurred to me that it might not ever have occurred to you. It was one of these like loops of things. And then I thought, what's my part in that? Why didn't I share this story with her? I love Amy. There's nothing I wouldn't tell her. And that sat with me along with a very similar reaction I got from a good mutual friend of ours. And it really became the seed of this. What is the opportunity here? If Amy doesn't know this story, how many stories are out there that people don't know? And what could be the benefit of sharing the stories? And what are the dynamics that play into the fact that these stories are probably a little bit hidden for a whole variety of reasons? It really was the seed for the podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And would love to hear, as you're reading this LinkedIn post, what was going on for you.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful. And I have to go back and reconstruct it because it was really just a feeling.
Yeah.
I think that what happened for me instantaneously reading that was this kind of fusion of parts of you into a whole person that I maybe hadn't seen in that way. It validated for me thinking that I've had for a long time that maybe hasn't been particularly well formed, but it's clear to me in my brain that to the extent that we can be our whole selves and express our whole selves and make our whole selves visible to the world, that we can do better work and feel better about ourselves and let go of some of the things that kind of distract us from what's possible. But it's easier said than done for someone like me, who I can't wait for everybody to know about me. I'll stand in the grocery store and tell you about being in my band and running my art tours and being on the board of this and the work that I do. I love doing that. But you're not really that kind of person. And I think you had clearly plenty of reasons to protect this particular part of yourself, which I understand totally because it's very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. It can be dangerous. And so I thought it was courageous and generous and all of the things that it takes to be able to put yourself out there in the way you did, in a way I hadn't seen you do it before. And then in that same moment, it was also like, yep, there she is. Mm. It just made total sense to me. And I think it made total sense to you as you were, if I may speak for you in your career journey, please, as you were trying to figure out your chapter here, knowing how effective you were as a coach, knowing that was really what you saw yourself as professionally. This is really the value you bring to any organization as a leader and a coach, all those incredible things that you do, to have found a groove for it that it fits you inside and out was just, I was so happy for you. Yeah, you finally found it. You figured it out. And I just think that's where the friction starts to disappear, is when that fusion can happen for people. And it's not possible for everybody. You made it happen for yourself in a way that I just thought was really incredible and inspiring and difficult and rare.
Thank you. It was an interesting journey. I spent quite a while really thinking about my niche and who I wanted to serve. And if you're watching on the screen, I could say it was right in front of me, except I went all the way around 360 degrees to find it. That's probably a longer story for another day. But when I did, it was an epiphany. And the minute I had it, I just knew it was, those things that you just know. It's that inner knowing, and the rest was history. Then the world did open up, and including the fact that you planted this seed that made me so curious about all of the dynamics of what underrepresented people go through, because we do have to navigate differently. And in some cases, it may be more difficult. In some ways, it's not difficult, but just different. But at the very least, it's different. And I had spent so much of my career just wanting to very directly just move on a path and not dwell on anything other than getting the job done and feeling 100% integrated into whatever was going on, to where I tucked certain things away. I only realized this within the last 6 months, and then started to think it's got to be the case for other people. There's likely some other people out there, and we can all get together and share our stories. And then as a second part of the text you sent to me, you shared a story that hits me in the heart so deeply. I wonder if you're open to sharing that story.
Oh, for sure. It hit me in the heart too. And it was such a big moment in understanding things that I hadn't understood before. I have a close family member who is a gay man who is a highly placed executive in a really big firm that you would know. And he has been running diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging initiatives on behalf of that firm and in a collaboration with other large firms, doing really important work. And he's also a filmmaker. So he did a film highlighting stories of LGBTQ employees in his firm. And they were just vignettes about experiences they had in the workplace and how they were unique. We were all together for Thanksgiving, and he was showing us this film, and we're all watching. It's beautiful. And one man told the story of having lost his lifetime partner over the weekend to a sudden death. And he was not out at work, and he had to go back to work on Monday like nothing happened, and he couldn't share this with his coworkers. And we went from being rapt and watching and inspired to bawling our eyes out, like, how could that happen? Can you imagine a lonelier feeling? And I couldn't. And so that was when I realized that there's something more to all this than just being tolerant and accepting and cool with it. There's something about making sure that there is a connection to people in which they can feel safe to be their whole self. I'm so curious about people. I think there's something wonderful in everybody, pretty much. And I tend to go looking for it. And so to me, I feel like I have a responsibility to be that person that's really reaching out. And I have some intuition about people. I can tell if there's someone in the room that maybe a little bit of outreach might get them out of their shell a little bit. I tend to be that kind of person and I go looking for it. But for sure, that was such a big moment. Oh, yeah. I can't imagine.
No. I remember a time very distinctly, and it was a fairly extended chunk of time in my career where, God forbid, had something like that happened in my life, I would not have felt comfortable. And just to look back, because I'm in such a different place now, but remember that, yeah, there's a moment where that's exactly what I would have felt I would have had to have done to be safe. And so that it hit me so deeply and inspired me also to want to do this. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we're all unique. And you're not part of a historically marginalized community, right? Yet you had a moment that you shared with me that's interesting that I didn't know about, where there's a part of, I can't wait to hear this story because you haven't told this story to me yet. I just know that you were called on the carpet in your career for part of your life, and I'll turn it over to you if you would like to share that story.
Yeah, this was a really interesting moment. I had been at a several day company kind of meeting, and I was on my way home when I got a phone call from a highly placed human resources executive. And she said, "I'm calling you as a friend." Yeah. Red flag.
Run.
She said, "I just think it would be really good if you didn't talk so much about your band at work. Because there are people who might think that it's a distraction for you." And I was just in disbelief. There was no part of me that found this to be appropriate advice. And what I hadn't shared with you is in juxtaposition to this, and I was thinking about it in the moment, I had a male colleague, also a musician, who had actually formed a little band with other employees, and they were performing at this meeting.
Oh my God.
I thought to myself, what is different? Am I talking about it too much, inappropriately? Nope. The only difference I could figure out is that I'm a woman and he's a man. I was just so indignant about it. I was just so mad. And I thanked her for the advice, and I told her I would consider it. And I think I did maybe tone things down a little bit. Certainly to trusted friends, I talked about it a little bit more. But then I would go to meetings and I would see people, like, there would be pictures of me performing that would be built into the presentation. Somebody found the internet. But there was something like that made people uncomfortable about this with me. There was something that was like, oh boy, if she does that, she could really run afoul of the people around here that are serious organization or whatever it was. I was like, what is the threat here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was something about me and doing it for sure that I think made it different. And I don't know what that something is. Because sometimes, like, Shanti, the thing that gets people is when somebody brings that type of feedback to you. If there's any part of you that believes it's true, maybe I am talking about it too much at work. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe it is a distraction. That's where they get you. The fact that I was able to immediately see this as garbage was a big moment for me, because typically I will internalize that and say, they must be right. My job is to make somebody right when they have something critical or constructive to say to me. But in this case, I was like, she must have been told me that we know you were born on Mars. I was like, what are you talking about? And it was just a big moment of recognizing that there's something different here and something unfair and unjust about it, that there's some threat of me being my whole self at work to other people.
Yeah. Here you are just being you, and it's a part of your life that's important to you and integral and happy, joyful, all of the good things. And you're being called out for it.
Yeah. It's like the same thing as when there wasn't a great tolerance in certain workplaces for things like tattoos and visible piercings, things like that. There was something threatening about this level of expression.
Yeah. Like taboo almost, like it's the traditional corporate image of a woman, and this was almost too edgy. Yeah. Typically, I like to zoom out at this point and ask, just looking back at your trajectory, your story, if you were to speak to people who are navigating their careers now, what would you want to share?
The biggest thing that I try to share with people from my own experience is that all of my potential, mindfulness, skills, everything good that's happened for me has happened because of the effort I made under extreme duress from a coach like you to quit being such a know-it-all and get curious and learn something. The household I grew up in, super intelligent people, like super intelligent. I'm like the dummy in that group. They're all mind-blowing how brilliant all my sisters and my parents were. My sisters are. And so knowledge was highly valued in our household. And I was much younger. I was like an oops kid. So I was like a little tiny kid trying to keep up. And I became very precocious. I had quite a vocabulary at 5 and 6 and stuff like that. In order to be included in the conversation as a little kid in an older family, what I knew and could bring to the table was my kind of ticket into it.
Yeah.
Not being, I don't want to overstate it by saying marginalized in my own family, but you got a bunch of adults in the room and a little kid, they're giving the kid Legos to play with. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to sit at the table. So I grew up with a high level of attachment to knowing things. And that was the thing that got me in the room. It was the thing that got people to pay attention to me. It was the thing that I was affirmed for. And it was almost a total career killer for me. So unwinding from that was difficult. It challenged my sense of who I was. It was so painful and vulnerable. And I came out on the other side of that just free. What I tell people is nobody cares what you know. The things that I knew when I started out, in the mid 90s in the media business are completely irrelevant today. Nothing I learned back then matters. The only reason that I still have value to bring is because I have embraced and tried to increase my capacity to learn.
Once again, did not know that, didn't know about the coach, didn't know about that part of your trajectory.
This is what you can do for people, Shanti. This is why I'm excited for you.
Right.
You can catch them before it's too late.
Appreciate that. That is the goal. I definitely hope to, between all my professional knowledge that I've gained and my personal paths, if I can save people some steps, let them do it with a little bit more ease and grace, then I'm thrilled. It's not easy to navigate the workplace or the world, and you're too close to it often to see it. So the fact that you had this coach that was able to help you see that, and just a point about your curiosity, because you talked about learning. I consider myself a curious person. When I was very little, the expression that was attached to me was, but why? To the extent that my dad and mom had a photo of me and they created one of those like little word bubbles with it, but why? And so that's my experience. And then I'd be in meetings with Amy. Sometimes we would have regional meetings and we'd be getting new information. I'm taking it in. I'm listening. I'm a big note taker. I'm taking lots of notes. And Amy's got a question that I was like, I wouldn't have even thought to ask that. That's a great question. And then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, there she is again. I'm like, God, I'm curious. I don't have these questions. So that always inspired me too. So whatever the coach did with you and whatever you went and ran with was so evident and is such a big part of what I respect about you is that deep curiosity that comes from such a pure place.
Thank you for saying that. I had to really give myself permission to live in that space versus the other. And it was, like I said, very challenging, but I think maybe the most important work that I ever did to be able to really make a difference for other people.
Yeah.
I think if I hadn't done that, I would have probably become a clinical narcissist or something like that.
Awesome.
Which I might already be. It's hard to tell.
No, I don't think so. But there's always tomorrow.
We start all over again.
All right. So we'll switch gears now into the segment of the podcast that I call, it's my podcast, so there will be music. Really accumulating some wonderful new artists and songs. And for me, music, like storytelling, hits a universal pure chord. And that's the other reason that I've included it in the podcast. So with that in mind, if there were one song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
This is a tough question. And before I answer it, I'll just say quickly that as a musician, the most common question I get from people is, what's your favorite song to sing? And I cannot answer it because I love music so much that I can't pick out favorites. Like I just love most of it. And the enjoyment that I get from singing and performing comes from lots and lots of different things, including the song, but it's not limited to that. So I can never answer that question. So I had to really put some thought into this. And the answer that I landed on is Scenes from an Italian Restaurant by Billy Joel. Reasons being, if I may, musically speaking, it's just an incredible piece of songwriting. If you just take the story out of it, which is in of itself, just this slice of Americana that is so relatable, just even the dynamics of the song where we have this beautiful bout kind of opening with the bottle of red and the bottle of white. And then we get into this fast paced thing where you feel like you're in the car running down the Jersey Turnpike with Brenda and Eddie, to the horns in it and all of the details of the music that just create this life flashing before your eyes of these two people that just are in love like a bottle rocket. They burn out and hit the ground and then they just move on. I cannot imagine a better choice for the future archaeologists that were trying to learn something about our life in this modern era, that they wouldn't learn something from Brenda and Eddie and Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. So that's my choice.
Love that. And it was interesting to me because I know how deeply attached to music you are and how broad your musical range and interests you have. And then you could have come up with something super obscure that's really lovely, I'm sure. A million choices. You picked something fairly mainstream, and there's something about that I really love, because I think when songs are out there for so long and become so incorporated into, again, the mainstream, they can lose their power. But it made me relook at that song and remember, as if I was hearing it for the first time, how wonderful it is in all the ways that you said. So that's awesome.
It's wonderful. It's one of those ones that's that kind of American anthem, like Bohemian Rhapsody, that just every time it comes on, I stop everything and I sing along with it at the top of my lungs.
I have to learn that for the next time we're together. I have not played that. It's a piano song. I don't know. I'll do my best, though.
It's a doozy. A doozy. Yeah. I'll just tell you, as a pianist, mad respect for Billy Joel.
Oh, that's crazy. It's interesting because sometimes the songs that sound like they'll be the easiest are the hardest and vice versa. Maybe I take it back. We'll see. But
that is true. We'll give it a run. And we'll run everybody else out of the room like last time.
Totally. Absolutely. Are there any other resources that you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. Resources. Plug for the incredible DEI and culture building workplace training that I am privileged to help deliver to corporations all over the world. It can be found at everfi.com, everfi.com, workplace culture and compliance training. It's really good stuff. And I think really helpful for people that are trying to drive these inclusive strategies and give people that stronger sense of belonging in the workplace. So if there's people that are hearing that and wondering how they can scale it out, I can help. I'd love to hear from them. It's a good resource. There's lots of good stuff on our website too. Even if you're not buying anything from us, you'll find lots of guides and white papers and helpful things. So that's probably the best I can offer for today.
Okay, that's fantastic. I want to plug Amy. And so if you're looking for Amy's last name is Bobchek, Bobchek. She's worth finding for all of the reasons, and just really ridiculously grateful that you're here. Can't thank you enough again for just being in my life in all the ways that you are, and for helping to inspire and support, as always, this part of my journey. So I appreciate you tremendously.
I appreciate you right back. You're an inspiration, and I'm honored to have had this conversation with you and to hear you describe me in the ways that you have. You just mean the world to me, and I'm so happy for you, and I love you a bunch.
I love you too. It's wonderful. It's a love fest. Oh, wait, what's your saying with dad jokes real quick?
I just think you can do better.
But it's my dad jokes.
I get it. I do.
All right.
I do. I know you love your dad, and I know he loves you back, but do better, man. They're terrible.
Always challenging me in good ways. So I'll take it. I'll take it.
That was the no BS part of me.
Yeah.
Dad jokes are garbage.
What else do you need to know? They stink.
I'd like to have a word with you.
All right. On that note, that brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire. Until next time, and thank you again so much to Amy. See ya.